Thanks. That was nice. So, can you hear me okay? Is this good? Okay. Can you get the lights? I guess I'll drop the first slide and then I do that. I always do this stupid thing of pointing at the screen. Thanks. Okay, so today I'm gonna show work, which is about 10 years of work. This is a painting I did in 1994. And so I'm starting with the work that I really felt was mine, or that I was kind of coming into my own. Before I talk about this painting, I think I'll just say a little bit more about my education, because I think it informs my work quite a bit. I got my BFA in painting from the School of Visual Arts, which had at the time a really great critical studies faculty like Benjamin Buchloh, Craig Owens, Hal Foster, which a lot of the faculty had a sort of Marxist bent, and there was a sort of anti-painting feeling in the air at that time. And I felt the need at that time to have my work be more real than painting, and that's sort of the shorthand of the whole long story. So I began making installations for a time, and I went to UCLA studying new genres. And while I was at UCLA, I guess I decided that no matter what you do, there's always a frame around your work. There's no way to avoid that frame, so why not just make a painting, since it's all the same? And since I love painting so much, just return to painting, and I felt like I could do that. But there was always this kind of struggle about the validity of painting, because the kind of death of painting stuff was in the air for the umpteenth time during my entire 7 years of higher education. So I think that, I mean, I even remember kind of muttering to myself in the studio during grad school, you know, trying to like talk to myself and come up with good arguments about the validity of painting. So I think that a lot of the restraint in my paintings is related to that, and the kind of complicated relationship I have with it. So anyway, this painting is a very small painting. It's about 6 by 8 inches. And it's acrylic gouache on gessoed panel. And this painting is really interesting to me and really important to me because it contains it was sort of a triumph for me, and it also contains the seeds of everything that I do now. It's just a little bit simpler. Well, one of the things that it does is it has this interest in something iconic. And somebody once asked me if I meant JFK the airport, but I didn't. I meant the person. So there's something iconic. There's something with indexing going on that you'll see a lot of that as I go through my slides. There's this real lighthearted presentation, and there's an interest in the relationship of color to meaning. And I think one of the other things that was a triumph at the time that I'm not so involved with now, but I really felt the desire to get rid of all vestiges of skill in my painting. And I think I achieved that in this very clumsy little painting. But I just, you know, the painting really came about by thinking about what happens to the character of anything, in this case, something or someone iconic, if you play with the color of its presentation. And so I just really got a kick out of seeing JFK and peach and JFK and, you know, teal and all these sort of sweet colors. There I go again. And at this time, this is 94, 95, I was really struggling with wanting to paint, and I was thinking a lot about how the marks that we make on a canvas are so privileged. So I decided to make this curtain. I started to paint on certain domestic objects and play with the line between design and painting. So this is a close-up of the curtain, and that is it in an installation. This was a show. think this was the first show I was ever in. It was a really interesting thing that a group of artists in Los Angeles rented out an entire motel and had a show. It was very nice. So that's my curtain in the motel. And this is a painting from the same time frame. So these works are still not exactly like, I don't feel great about them, but they're still, I'm getting closer and closer to my interests. This painting is called Bright Moments, which is the name of a Roland Kirk song. And I was really wanting to, I mean, when I look at it now, it looks sort of formulaic in a way. It kind of looks like a process painting with two Disney-esque bubbles, and I guess that's what it is. Sort of a, but I was really thinking about, and it became increasingly important, thinking about making a painting that was kind of an homage to a perfect moment, and thinking about making anti-epic paintings that along those lines. And so all of this culminated in my first show, which is this, comes after this image. This image was really important to me, and this is not one of my works. This is influence, so to speak. This is a sweatshirt with puff paint that I found in a Salvation Army in Maine, Waterville, Maine. And I realized I only showed a couple of my paintings, but it looks like I made it. So it was really kind of freaky when I found it. And I had been thinking a lot about resolution and irresolution in paintings, and how do we define those rules, and how do we all agree on them, and thinking about these kind of silent codes of how a painting works or doesn't work. And so I'd been playing around with this thing in my studio where I would make marks and then just sort of stop for no apparent reason. And I kind of thought about it like, well, what if I died in the middle of this stroke? So when I saw this sweatshirt, it looked like the person who made it had been thinking the same thing, or maybe, you know, something happened and they had to stop making their sweatshirt design. But it really kind of gave me the initiative to keep going with this idea, because I loved how, even though this is an abstract design, there's a whole narrative behind it. It's an invented narrative. You really project onto it, but it's there nonetheless. So this is a painting, and the next group of paintings is from my first show in 1996, my first solo show. I'll try to focus. And this is a long painting. It's painted on a hollow core door, which is kind of funny. That's why it has this strange orientation. I didn't have much money, so that was kind of a cheap way to go. So it's like 36 by 80 inches, I think, and it's acrylic gouache and gesso on wood. And it's called gonadotropins, which is the hormone that kicks in adolescence. So this one has like, sometimes it's hard to see my paintings in slides, so I'll describe it a little bit. That interruption in the middle is really, really abrupt, really sharp, and you can kind of see it on the right-hand side of this slide, where it's just empty space, gessoed space again. This painting is called Interlude, and I had read somewhere that the root of the word interlude has to do with, it originally was a short farcical play in between a more serious play, I think maybe the 17th century England. And I really kind of wanted to situate my whole show like that. Like, what if, how do you make a show of paintings that are all about this lightness and this silliness and this sort of fluff, some romance, infatuation, all sorts of like beautiful, perfect little light moments, but be taken seriously, and occasionally dipping into not light in the sense of lighthearted, but light in the sense of kind of stupid. I really wanted to see if I could touch upon sort of fluffy stupidity without being stupid myself. And I was really influenced by Madame Bovary, the novel Madame Bovary, and Flaubert in general. he wrote a novel. His last novel is called Bouvard and Pécuchet, and it's about these two idiots. And it's an incredible book because it's so idiotic. But you know, how do you make a story about everybody in it is an idiot, but the book itself is brilliant? And so I was really thinking a lot about him and Madame Bovary, and thinking about my role as an artist, not so much as a maker of pictures, but in literary terms. Like, I did not want to be the artist making these. I did not want to be responsible for them. I wanted to be more akin to a novelist writing a story, and I was the character painting these. However, I didn't tell anybody about this whole complicated structure. I just kept that for myself. Which I think now I wish that I had actually brought that to bear on the work. This one is called Sweetie. All the paintings just about in this whole presentation are acrylic gouache. This is an untitled one. Sort of has this color-coded looking thing on the side, which is interesting to me because I'm still doing that today. Something that looks like it has a meaning, but it doesn't really. I think this one's like the weakest one in the show, but I decided to show it anyway. It's very small. Another thing I was really excited about in this show was that I would present some work that was image-based and some work that was abstract. And I felt, I really wanted them to be seen on the same playing field, and I still do. And I think that confuses people sometimes about my work. It's all visual information to me, and I don't like to make a distinction. So I took this Happy Valentine's thing and sort of played it out to see how I could alter the meaning. It's there. That's just like all the ugly greens I could come up with.
How big are all these?
They range, a couple of them, they range from like notebook paper size to about 3 by 4 feet. And then in the show, this is the last three-dimensional thing I've made since this time, 96. This was a like 45-foot banner, like a supermarket or used car lot banner. So it was 45 feet by 5 inches. But the fabric was sort of this pretty iridescent polyester. And it was hung above the paintings, very close to the ceiling. A lot of people didn't actually see it. So after I did that show, I wanted to think about what to do next, and I just did this series of banners that I always really liked. I never showed these. This one was based on somebody showed me that her parents had a vinyl banner made for her graduation at RISD, which, she was mortified because nobody really does that in art school, like brings this kind of thing. It's just not done. And so they brought this huge banner to her graduation and hung it. And so she showed me the photograph of it, and I was so taken by the buttery quality of the vinyl and the commercial colors, I couldn't get it out of my head. So I just made this replication of it, and I really liked the idea of creating these fake, temporary celebratory things. So I painted them and put grommets on them. They're on paper, but they're very large, and I tried to make them look like they were made from vinyl. After that, I returned to painting on canvas. I got really into this sign painter research that I did for that project. Like, I pretended that I had a banner company called Brooklyn Banner so that I could receive trade magazines. And it's kind of weird to me now to look back and think about how I got so involved. But I was inspired by all the supplies. And so these paintings came from looking at racing stripes and card detailing. And I just thought a lot about slowing down the speed or interrupting. Those first two were in the 3-foot range, and then these next ones are much larger, more in the 8-foot range. That's a girl's phone number in the upper right-hand corner. Friend. It's sort of a doodle painting. And that kind of segued into making a series of paintings that were based on false starts. I basically wanted the paintings to fail. Just keep on trying, starting something and not covering up my mistake. Just keep on starting like 10 times. Let me see if this focuses at all. A little bit. There's this little orange asterisk on that one in the center that's really hard to see, but it kind of makes the whole painting come together. This one is quite large and quite hard to see in this context, but it's pink paint mixed into gesso and painted fairly quickly, and so it looks like these kind of big cotton candy hills with juxtaposed with a very graphic kind of flame. Still looking at those sign painter magazines. Same idea, false starts. At this point, that last body of work is not my favorite. I like it okay, but my work started to get more and more graphic. And it's not a coincidence that I started working in graphic design, freelance stuff. And I think not only did that affect the kind of hard edge of my work, it affected the way that I thought about visual language. It was really exciting to me to be working on, I did mechanicals and stuff, so real dopey work, working with other people's designs, just production. So I would be working on a Western at like 10 o'clock in the morning and like a romance at 11 o'clock, and it was just so incredible to me to shift aesthetic gears so quickly, and it started to affect my work. I found it really exciting. But the work starts to take on this real finish, this real sense of completion and, to me, convincingness, just in the way that it's painted. I developed this theory that I could paint anything, really meaningless, stupid thing, but if I painted it convincingly, it could be interesting. So I was testing that quite a bit. This one's very, very large, like about 8 foot square.
Still on panel?
This is on canvas. I think I switched to canvas at some point along the way. When they got too big, they got too heavy.
So you're painting on a gessoed ground or a white painted ground?
It's gesso, yeah, and it's quite a bit of gesso, and it's sanded a lot, so it's very brilliant. It kind of reflects the light in a very even and beautiful way. Usually about 20 coats of gesso at the minimum. So
Is that something you're thinking too?
no, this is gouache again. It's real matte, and it's really hard, if anyone's ever worked with gouache, to paint black, an even black gouache surface, because it shows every time you change directions with the brush. So I don't even know how I accomplished that. It was very hard. But I really wanted that matte velvet finish. So you can kind of see with this like flower design that I keep on reducing. I keep on taking away first color and then the center. Eventually, I wanted to get rid of the flowers too. This is a real silly little painting, or diptych, I guess I should say. Small, like 13 by 13 each panel is. But I always really liked the lightness of it. And it came about in a very quick way, but the pumpkin, or the jack-o'-lantern, led me to about a dozen other paintings of jack-o'-lanterns, which you'll see in a second. I started thinking about the jack-o'-lantern as a really nice example of kind of everyday creative initiative, as opposed to what goes on in the space of a canvas, or what can go on. And I wanted to bring that to bear. So this painting is probably my favorite painting that I've ever done. And it's really small. It's on 8.5 by 11 panel. And it's called Gambling, Traveling, Dueling. And it came about because I was trying to, let's see how much time do I have. It came about because I was trying to work on a body of work where I played with pie charting and pie charting emotional states, because I was interested in how charting is so concrete and emotional states are so in flux. So I did this every day, and I had this whole series of panels, and I decided I hated all of them when I got to a certain point, because they seemed so much about self-expression or my emotional life, and I didn't really care about that. That wasn't what I wanted to get to. So I destroyed all of them, and but I really wanted to do something with this pie chart format. And I was procrastinating in my studio and just picked up a book off the shelf, and it was like a college text on Descartes. And I read this sentence in the introduction that said, in whatever year, 16-something, before he became a philosopher, Descartes spent his time gambling, traveling, and dueling. And I just loved that sentence, and somehow I just kind of morphed it together in my mind's eye with what I'd been trying to do with the pie chart. And thought about like the ridiculous or not so ridiculous relationship of the color to the words, to the content. This is a large painting, 8-foot range, called Everyone's Name Was Cherry. I don't usually do this, but I had a dream that that was the name of the painting, so I just went ahead because that was pretty weird and specific. And in this one, I was really thinking about color associations and trying to twerk them and play with them. Kind of place colors together so that they would not mean anything, so that they would cancel all interpretation out. I'm not sure how successful I was in that one. I think a little better in this one. So the pumpkin makes a reappearance, and this painting that I was thinking, trying to make it look like a logo for something, but something pretty absurd. This one is 65 by 75. Most of the last few have been. And this one is also 65 by 75. It's kind of hard to see because there's just information on the very bottom of it, and it's called Thriller. Thriller, like the Michael Jackson song. And that's good because you can see them in context, see their scale. So that's the last 3 paintings in a show. Dirty slide. This one really came from working in the publishing industry. It's called Cruising for Murder, which was the name of a book jacket, the book title that I had worked on the jacket. And this really started something with indexing that I'm still working on to this day. This is getting a little sick of this emptying out of space thing. So I decided to challenge myself and make these really full, centrally located paintings. So that's what these 2 sort of mandala type images are. And it's not so important to me that they're mandalas, or mandala-like, but I just wanted to create an icon where I could play with color, like kind of a structure to mess with the color, like defy expectations or do that thing with complicating the associations, the associative meaning of color. So I started with these 2 colors that sort of evoked antiquity, Greek or Roman antiquity, and then tried to use this really silly contemporary icon and colors that just are completely running the gamut to create something that was not readable, basically. And that's a detail. This is the painting that was behind the arch in the installation shot. It's kind of a washed out slide. This next one gives a better idea of the color. I tried to never replicate a color in every single flower. This painting's a little smaller than the last ones. And actually, this was in a show here in Chicago about 4 years ago when Kavi Gupta was Vedanta, so maybe some of you might have seen it. A couple of the gambling dueling one was in it too. This one I was thinking about morphing holidays, like what would happen if I morphed Easter and Halloween, basically. And then the colors around the edge are nonsensical as and that's a detail. Really tiny, tiny flowers, like pinky nail size. There's that pumpkin again. I think this might be the final incarnation of the jack-o'-lantern. It's kind of funny since it's fading away.
You don't do any stenciling? This is all freehand.
It's all freehand. I'm never any good at that stenciling. This is a tiny little painting, but the indexing was starting to come about. These are two very small little icons. And these two paintings were actually in the same show with the big sort of mandala type paintings, and I really liked the relationship that they had, especially this one, because the black sort of tied them together, and just this made the big painting with the black center much more sinister somehow when it was in proximity to it. So this is sort of following along the lines of the Cruising for Murder painting. This one's called Long Story Short, and it's pretty small. I think it's 9 by 14. But I read some story about a lecture at Northwestern that I didn't actually go to, but it was about criminology and how criminology, the way of compiling statistics, had changed in the last century. And somehow this really got me going about how the way that we catalog really affects the way that we understand information. So it sort of got me excited to work with indexes again, although I couldn't really put my finger on why for a long time. So I created a bunch of basically, I guess, absurdist indexes. This one's quite large. That's a detail. That's a detail too. Another quite large one. I'll just go to the details. It's a lightning bolt that's being cut off there. That's a rare moment of, as sentimental as my paintings look, they're not usually really sentimental, but this was actually from something that had belonged to my grandmother, and she had died that year. This one's called Adventure. I guess with these sort of titles, I kind of just thinking about my hopes for painting, like thriller and adventure, but they're really these mute objects, and there's a tension that I feel between that. This one is called Double. It's actually a diptych. You can kind of see. This painting I actually destroyed. I didn't like it, but I kept it in here just because I think that the way that the detail reads is clearer than some of the other slides. I didn't have details of all of them. But I kind of cut it out at this point and destroyed this painting because, what happened? Because the narrative, it was very hard to create a narrative that didn't lead somewhere. And this one was starting to look like it was telling a tale, and I didn't want it to. As I mentioned, I was interested in information canceling itself out and becoming mute again. So I think this slide never really comes into focus. But there's a nurse's hat and a watermelon. The watermelon and the werewolf leg keep coming up. That's a very small painting. Oh, this is the farewell to the jack-o'-lantern. So I got rid of his eyes. This is a really large and much more painterly. This is actually acrylic and much more painterly image than I usually make, but I really got into the sort of confection of all of the flowers. A lot of them have a lot of sort of delicious details. And then I went through kind of a crisis because I didn't really like, I suddenly just hated all of this girly stuff in my own work, and I wanted to get rid of it. And once I got rid of it, I didn't know what to do. So, because it formed so much of what the work was. But I felt that I had outgrown it, and I couldn't do it anymore. And so I spent a long time, like, I don't know, a year and a half, sort of making terrible things and struggling with it. And I returned to this sort of thing that I call a starflake, between a star and a snowflake, that was in a bunch of the pumpkin paintings. And I thought it would be nice to create, to develop the work ahead, to take that idea, but get rid of the icon that they circle around, so that the person looking at it is kind of being circled by them. Pretty corny, but so that they're sort of like these transportable parties in a way. And then at the same time, I liked how they just became a kind of stable form that I could play with color again. And again, take this very familiar form that you would expect certain color, you would have certain color associations with, sort of festive, and use color that you wouldn't expect there and see what happened to that language. And I mean, believe it or not, these paintings took forever, partially because of this crisis I was going through, but they took like 6 months each, even though they have hardly any paint on them. They're kind of large, though.
Because your surfaces are still being really tended to, right?
Yeah.
That's where a lot of painting
Yeah.
happens. Just
And in this one, it sort of was good for the surface because I kept changing it so many times and having to gesso. So I like it when the grain of the canvas is gone, and so it becomes really smooth and kind of glass-like. This is a slide that I'm sad is washed out. The painting is a lot, the color's not so light. But, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on a second. This painting came a lot from teaching, actually, teaching color theory and playing with expectations of color, also thinking about color systems and the fragility of those color systems. This one I thought I'd try acrylic again, and then I stopped because I just don't like it. But I do like this painting, and I like its title, which is Wittgenstein for Dummies. It's sort of an alternate universe color theory system. And then it's funny because this painting probably looks pretty different from the last one, but thinking along the lines of systems, language systems that fall apart. This was painted like right on the heels of the other one. So, so I started this cactus thing, for lack of a better word. This is a painting. The images are actually different. I did not want to do these tiny icons anymore. I blew them up, so each image, each cactus is approximately, or an average of about 16 inches or 20 inches or something. And I played around with this type of painting for about a year. I've really, really slowed down my process. With each passing year, I get more precise, and so really long periods of time can go by with failure after failure after failure. So I did this painting thinking about all the different ways that one could describe a cactus. I wanted to make them up myself originally, but I was amazed at how quickly my imagination ran out for ways to describe a cactus. So I started asking friends, but I didn't really like that. I felt like that as a methodology had been kind of played out, and I just wasn't interested in it. And so I started doing Google searches on the internet for cactus imagery, and I found myself, I kept on being put in stock photography websites, and that was really exciting to me because during my time working in publishing, I looked at these stock photography catalogs and just known I wanted to do something with the way that information was categorized, but I never knew exactly what. So I started doing image searches like crazy, and then playing around with arrangements for these cacti, these different representations of cacti. And this, I did a bunch of works on paper, so this slide is so dirty, where I kind of had the freedom to play with different sorts of compositions. But I liked this as a work on paper, but I couldn't really imagine making a painting like that. So these are still on paper, the next few, but I really started thinking about how am I going to make paintings, and I did all of these sort of different arrangements of cacti. And a lot of these come from like corporate logos that I found on the internet, like nurseries or things like that. I never used any imagery that was like someone's direct, like on a website for illustration, advertising their creative effort, but sort of I was attracted to kind of anonymous design. There's a lot of clip art actually involved. And then each one has a couple of ones that I invented. So this one I actually started collaging so that I would paint them and then cut them out, and then so I could have more freedom to play with the composition. So I did a lot of these collages. And I used the, you can see, I used the plain white paper glued on top just in the same way that I do gesso to like get rid of stuff. But you can still see traces of it. I really thought of this as a taxonomy of descriptions. So I really wanted it to have this sort of linear quality. But I tried this in a canvas and it just looked too rigid. So that told me that I actually didn't want it to be a taxonomy so completely, that I wanted there to be something more whimsical at the same time. So I liked this as a work on paper, but when it became a painting, it just didn't work anymore. So this was the best one, I thought. This was like kind of a random, sort of like a sprinkling, like I just had taken them, shaken them up, and threw them down on a piece of paper, even though this is actually not collage, this is painting. And so I think, can you change carousels? And so that, the drawings lead up to the paintings, which are the next slides and the final slides and the body of work that I just completed last week, actually. So, let's see. So this was the first really successful painting. So even though I had a cactus painting before that, I wasn't exactly happy with it. I did end up bringing the scale of the icons back down to miniature size. I felt that they needed to be in this, playing with this idea of indexing information that was appropriate to like informational design or charting. And since that's so hard to see, here's a detail. So I really just started, like I don't remember where I started, but I just put the canvas flat like a drawing and just did them like maybe 2 a day, 3 a day, until I felt like I was finished. That's another detail. I wanted, this one is a similar idea but with moons, and it ended up being much more sparse than the other because even though I really wanted to be true to this idea and not impose my taste on the choices, which of course is impossible, but not impose my taste on the choices of imagery that I downloaded, I couldn't help myself when there was so much kind of New Age imagery of moons. I just hated them so much that I could not bring myself to include them. I would paint them and I'd just go, oh God, I don't like it. So I'd get rid of it. That's the detail. And I thought I'd play a little bit with a hint of perspective, since I never had allowed myself to do that, or never even wanted to, but since they were trees, I thought maybe if I played just a little bit with it, it might create a nice tension. It's a detail of that one. This one originally, this is a smaller one. Most of these are about 60-inch range. This one's like 30-inch. This one was going to be like, I guess they call it a tree, like an index, a computer index for websites. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? So I thought I would have this layout very similar to that. But it was so dry, once again. I followed my idea. It was so dry, I couldn't stand it. I had to mix it up and complicate it and make it not make sense anymore. So I started putting the four or five trees on the right, threw them in there, which made it less sensical. That's a detail of that one. And it's funny because like I was saying with the first body work that I showed, that it was influenced by Flaubert, this one comes directly from a French writer, Raymond Queneau, who wrote a book, I think in the 60s, 50s, I'm not exactly sure when, called Exercises in Style. And what the book was a very, very funny compilation of 99 essays of the same very short story, very stupid story about seeing a man on a bus. He gets in a fight, his button falls off his jacket. That's it. That's the whole story. And each chapter, so to speak, is described in such a different way that the whole sense of, it's sort of a spoof of literary realism. So the whole feeling of the real slips away, and you begin to get a sense of how much our construction affects how we see things. And I felt really excited by that, and that I wanted to do something related with visual descriptions. So I'm hoping that in these, what I'm trying to achieve in these paintings is that the categories actually dissolve. Oops, somebody's calling me. That's terrible.
I'm glad that's what it is.
I just got that. So here's another one. And that's a detail. There's a guy like climbing a tree in the bottom. That's like one of my favorite ones. And this is the largest one. This one is 65 by 75. And I think it's the last slide, actually, the last painting. Sorry. I didn't have a watch. This is why I have this here. This is my favorite, and I'm really happy that it came about this way, that my favorite of the group, because it barely hangs together. Like, I think that the imagery was starting to hang a little too neatly together, which was the opposite of what I was trying. I mean, I still feel they're pretty successful paintings, and I'm happy with them, but in this one, I really tried hard to make a painting that was barely hanging together by a thread, and I found it really interesting how difficult that was and how many times I had to change it, because I thought, well, I'll just throw these things down there, and whatever is. But it's not about chance. It really required a lot of painterly knowledge, like tonal knowledge, and knowing how to move the eye around. And I got rid of a lot. I edited a lot and changed it a lot before I came up with this, which looks like they just sort of appeared there. So it has this sort of buoyancy that I always like my paintings to have, and kind of lightness. And I took a couple detail shots. There's this tree there, and then the upper one, which you really can't see at all in this slide. So there's this one, which was like a computer generated, probably like MIT website or something. And then this one, which said, it came from a website that said, "Tree hugger and proud of it." And I changed it a little. I changed most of them a little. And so that's it.